Hi, Ian. Welcome to the Empowered Nutrition Podcast. How are you?
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Where are you coming in from?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, how is it there right now?
Cold and rainy, pretty much what we get in the winter.
Typical.
Yeah. Where are you? Where are you?
We're in North Carolina.
Oh, how's the weather there?
Actually, also rainy, but not as chronically.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm
People
excited.
people who move to Portland, what drives them crazy is it's cloudy a lot. It's not even
Yeah,
that it rains all that much. It's just that it's cloudy. So
yeah, and just kind of dark and gloomy.
yeah, people just they get seasonal affective really, really bad.
I used to live in England, and it was like hard to predict who would be okay and who wouldn't because we were a military family. So it'd be like a lot of people coming and going, and some
Hmm.
people it didn't bother them at all, and some people it would just be like, I can't even live here, and I couldn't really fill out like what the rhyme or reason to that was.
Yeah. Yeah. People who often come from LA, California, San Diego, Arizona, places like that. They get here and they spend their first winter and they're like, "Ugh,
Yeah,
I might need to move back." They're
yeah,
definitely the gray gets to people who are used
yeah.
to the sun.
You gotta
Yeah.
get that desk therapy lamp going.
Right. I gotta get that. Yeah, you gotta get your UV. But even then, it's just being in the gray all the time. People are like, when is the sun gonna come out? And they just
Yeah, exactly.
for people who like the sun, it's Portland's hard.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk about food story coaching. So,
Mm.
I was researching it, and it's
Mhm.
such an interesting thing. I'm curious, like, what your story is. So, like, how did you get into this topic?
It was professional slash personal. So I'll tell my quick my quick personal story. So I was born in '69. I'm quite a bit older than probably you are and a lot of your listeners, but if they're your peers. So I was born in '69, raised in the '70s and '80s. And so in the early to mid '80s, I was a skinny little kid, very,
Yeah.
very skinny little kid, when Arnold Schwarzenegger and
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone and Jean-Claude Van Damme
Yeah.
were just like the thing. They were like
Yeah.
all over the screen.
Uh,
And I was probably 13 and I was starting to not feel so great about my body. And,
Oh,
people called me string bean and toothpick, and people were not very nice to me when
no.
when I was young. So I started working out and I started trying to eat better and that type of thing. But of course, nothing worked. Nothing worked.
Mhm.
I went to the gym. I asked every guy in there that was bigger than and more buff than me, what did you do? So I tried everything. I tried high carb, low carb. I tried high protein. I tried high
Yeah.
reps, low reps. I tried 3-day splits, 5-day splits. I tried 3 meals.
All the
The
things.
forget it. I tried it all. But again, this is mid '80s. The personal training industry was not really a thing. And by the time I was 18, I finally was 5'10" and I weighed 120.
120?
5'10" and 120.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
like to joke that I was like a supermodel,
Uh,
a female supermodel, but hey, I was, I had to take what I.
yeah.
So I was 18. My dad had been having some thyroid issues, and we thought, well, maybe you have a thyroid issue. So we'll send you to an endocrinologist. So I went to an endocrinologist, and he said, all right, fill out all this paperwork, and took all this blood, and he said, come back in a couple of weeks. And I went back in a couple of weeks, and he said, well, I think it's one of two things. Or when I left that day, he said, it's one of two things. And when I came back, he said, yeah, I figured it out. I don't know what's going on with you. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, you have an imbalance in your parasympathetic nervous system.
Mm.
What 18-year-old understands that?
Yeah, you're like, thanks for giving me no answers.
Thank you. Thank you for the non-answer. Yeah, this is like 1987. Like, this is worthless to me. Basically, what he was saying, but we didn't say this in 1987. We started saying this in the 90s, which was you have ADHD or you're hyperactive or you're hyperadrenal or
Yeah.
something to that effect. But they didn't say that back then. He said this imbalance in my parasympathetic nervous system,
Okay.
which on reflection, I look back, makes perfect sense. I was a bounce off the walls kind of kid, couldn't sit still. My mom used to call me a fidget widget, which is a funny little way of talking about like, you sit still for goodness sake.
Yeah.
So I saw my first nutritionist right after that. He sent me to a nutritionist, and I remember this nutritionist looking at my plan. She's like, okay, gain weight, gain weight, gain weight. Okay, hold on.
Oh. She's like, I'm
I
not
know
sure
how
what
to
to
do
do
this.
with that goal. That's
Right?
funny.
Like nobody comes to me for weight gain. What do I do?
That's
Oh, I
funny.
know. I'll have you do all the opposite of what I tell everybody else to do.
Okay.
And she did. And she did. So, it was like creamy dressings were fine. And you could put butter
Yeah.
on things. And I could, have all the salad dressing I want. And, sure, dessert's fine if you've had a meal and this sort of thing. So overnight, she doubled my calories.
Wow.
Yeah, doubled my calories overnight. I went from 1,500 or so calories to 3,000.
Nice.
And I started to eat at 7 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4, 7, and 10.
Okay.
Whether I was hungry or not, I was eating 600 calories or 500
Yeah.
calories. 5 times 6 is 3,000.
You're on like the college athlete nutrition plan.
I really was. Yeah, I was on the that's a perfect example, perfect description. And I mean, for an example, I was drinking 4 glasses of whole milk a day just to get the calories in because there was just no other
Dang.
way I was going to get it in. So I basically spent 3 years nauseous, bloated, and on the verge of throwing up and just forcing myself to eat food most of the day because my
Yeah.
natural appetite was not to eat 3,000 calories.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I think, oh, there was a lot there. This food story thing, this food relationship thing. Yeah, that's a nexus point for that. I made it to 150 in about 3 years when I was about 21, 22. I was 150
Okay.
pounds. And she says, okay,
Jeez.
now we're going to give you a more normal diet. So then she got into the lower fat diet and, she cut me back.
Okay.
But I still spent the rest of my, 20s and into my early 30s. Well, through my 20s, still trying to get bigger and more buff because I was looking to be like 170 and I wanted to be like 8 to 10% body fat, like totally
Sure.
unrealistic, right out of Muscle and Fiction magazine kind of crap. So, and then I was, graduated from my undergrad and was working and I tweaked my back. I zinged up my back.
Yeah.
I ended up seeing a chiropractor for the first time. And he said, there's this thing called core exercises and, stretching and good posture and all these things. Because I had just been in the gym crashing weights. I didn't have any good form.
Okay.
And so I started doing that, listening to him and started thinking about eating a little differently. And I had moved up to Portland by then. And I was really excited about natural and organic food. I had spent some time on a friend's farm. So I was really inspired to eat healthier. So it had been coming. It had been coming.
Sure.
And a couple of years after I graduated from undergrad, late, I went to undergrad late, so I was 26, 7, 8 when I graduated. I was in the environmental field, and that just really wasn't working for me. So I was like, well, what else can I do? And I was like, well, I'm pretty knowledgeable about food and fitness and working out because I've been doing it since I'd been 13. So I got a job at Jenny Craig and at GNC. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh wow, what an experience that was. Yeah, so I spent a couple of years at GNC asking people, well, I know you want to buy this supplement, but how's your diet? How's your exercise? And I spent a couple of years as a weight loss consultant at Jenny Craig trying to convince people to eat Jenny Craig food when in fact what they really needed was this sort of life health coaching support that they weren't getting. And when I left both of those jobs, I was like, well, I don't want to just try to sell people packaged food. And I don't want to just sell people supplements. I wanted to do the whole thing. So I got certified as a personal trainer and I got a job where I was able to do all of it. I was running weight loss programs. I was doing nutrition. I was doing personal training. I was doing supplementation. I was doing the whole 9 yards. And it didn't take long. And you'll of course vibe with this, having been in this field for a while. I would have clients who would come in, and I'll tell 2 quick stories. And I don't remember whether it was a man or a woman, so it doesn't really matter. But I remember one of my clients saying, basically, they'd come in the morning or come into my session, and they were like, "Yeah, this breakfast thing is getting in the way. It's challenging. Maybe I should do more cardio, and maybe I should fast." I forget exactly what they were talking about. I was like, "What's really going on here?" They're like, "Well, maybe I should, get up in the morning and do cardio in the morning, so I can burn more fat or whatever." And I was like, wait, this doesn't sound like it's about that. What's it really about? And they were kind of shy and sheepish and embarrassed about this whole, well, this sounds like a breakfast issue. Like you're talking to me about stuff, but why do you keep talking about breakfast and then this other stuff? And they were like, well, you remember how you said, Ian, that we decided I was going to eat oatmeal for breakfast? You're probably too young to remember this, but oatmeal was like the thing for a few
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Soluble fiber. And so oatmeal was like this magic food, just like we love to do in America. We love to sell magic foods. And and she was like, "Oh, yeah, that whole breakfast thing with oatmeal. The truth is, I don't really like oatmeal." And I was like, "Well, why did you tell me that you would eat oatmeal every morning?" And she's like, "Well, because you said it would be good for me and like it would help me lose weight and give me energy and all these things." And I was like, "Well, what difference does it make if you don't like oatmeal?" And she's like, "Oh, well, I don't know." I'm like, "Well, what are you eating for breakfast now?" She's like, "Well, I either skip breakfast, eat McDonald's." I'm like, "Well, that's not helping us." I'm like, "Well, what would you do if you could do anything you wanted?" She's like, "Well, I'd just as soon have leftovers." I was like, "Well, then have leftovers." And she was like, "Is that okay?" I was like, "Well, it's better than what you're doing." She's like, "Oh, okay. If you think it's okay." And I was like, "Okay, it's fine." I started thinking, what's going on here? There's some weird stuff going on. And more of my clients were having a hard time changing their diet. They'd come in, they'd work out, they'd take their supplements, but I would talk to them more and more about their diet. They'd be like, "Well, this and that and the other thing, family and time and all these different things." And they would always say to me at the beginning, "Well, you tell me what to do and I'll do it." And I'd be like, "All right, I'll tell you what to do." And all right. But then they wouldn't do it. And I'd say, "Well, you said that you wanted me to tell you what to do. I've given you all the information. What's going on?" "Well, it's this and it's that and it's the kids and it's the dog and it's the job and it's time and I don't know. I don't really like this vegetable and everything." And I was like, "Okay, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that." And I started realizing there's more going on here. I didn't quite figure out. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And this is before the two women wrote the book about intuitive eating. This is way before body positivity. This is way before, health at every size. This is way before even the world of holistic nutrition even started. There was nothing but MSRDs in the world. There was no such thing as holistic nutrition. And if there was, it was, some weekend seminar that people took and, called themselves a nutritionist, but they didn't really know what they were talking about. And eating disorders were, really hush hush, and you didn't talk about eating disorders. But I was like, these are not these people. They understand the science and they don't have eating disorders. There's something else going on. So I went back to school with this question. If people say they know what to do and they say they want to do what I've given them as information, why aren't they doing it? And I thought about psychology and I thought about naturopathic medicine and I thought about becoming a nutritionist and I thought about all these different things. Interestingly enough, I ended up at a program where I was able to sort of ask myself all those questions and do a bunch of research, sort of independent study. And the bottom line is, what I came up with is that everybody has a relationship with food or a food story. And it's this story, this relationship with food, that is created by cultural forces and individual experience that's actually at the root of most people's day-to-day interactions with food. And if we don't address their relationship with food, if we don't talk to them about their food story, we can tell them all day long what to eat and why it's good for them, but they're going to struggle to have success. And so for the last 10, 15 odd years, I've been doing food story coaching with clients. And more recently, in the last 10 years, I've actually been teaching it to other nutritionists and naturopaths and chiropractors who do nutrition and things like that, because what they had told me was they weren't having very good success getting their clients to make dietary change. I said, "Well, try this." And they were like, "Oh my gosh, wow, no one ever taught me that." And started making a real difference. So that's what led me to you, which is one of my students from the college that I teach at, from the master's program that I teach at. One of my students, one of my graduates, connected me with you. That's how I got here.
Yeah, that's so interesting. When you say the food story they have built up, like tell me some specifics about like what needs to be addressed about the food story they have.
Can I do that by asking a question?
Yeah.
Okay. You're a nutritionist, so everybody expects that you've got your whole diet totally dialed in, right? You're the expert. But I'm sure, just like you and I both, we're human, and we probably have stuff that we struggle with our own diets.
Sure.
So just tell me one thing that you can think of that you're like, yeah, I'm supposed to be doing that. I know I should be doing that, but you struggle with it yourself. Like for me, it's caffeine, and it's sort of greasy food that's not really good for me. Like, occasional
Yeah.
food, but just like, pizza and things like that. Like I know those are hard for me to like stay away from. Is there one
Yeah.
thing that's challenging for you?
So many things, but yeah,
So,
lately definitely sugar, eating more sugar than I probably should.
right. And you know it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So for me, it's a comfort thing. For me, it's a convenience thing. Sometimes when I'm busy. How about you when it comes to sugar? Same thing?
Yeah,
Different?
it probably, yeah,
Okay. That's food relationship. That's their food story. It's like
sure.
people know all kinds of things. They know they should eat more vegetables. They know they should eat more than one time a day. They know they should drink water, but
Hmm.
they don't for any number of reasons. It's comfort, it's habit, it's attachment.
Hmm.
It's, well, yeah, but that's my favorite food and I don't want to give it up. Or,
Yeah.
yeah, but my family likes that food, so it's always in the house. So if it's in the house, I'm going to eat it. It's logistics, but it's also the stories, the thoughts, the feelings, the tapes that we all have in our head about, well, I should do this, but I really want to do that. And I know that this is better, but I seem to not be able to change my habit because I'm avoiding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that it's getting the information when it comes to nutrition is important because there's a lot of confusing and conflicting information. So I find that it's important to establish, like, okay, for your specific case and your
Mm-hmm.
situation, here's
Mm-hmm.
the nutrition
Yep.
pattern that
Yep.
we're going to pursue. But that is a very relatively quick and simple thing to achieve. And then where people like really struggle, as you said, is to like, actually implement it
Yep.
in on a especially like on a chronic like
Yeah. Yeah.
basis.
Yeah. It's going to take a long time to get it dialed in. It's very challenging.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the like and maybe it's not even this, but I almost imagine that you need like a replacement story. Um
It's interesting that you would say it that way. It's what I the metaphor of story allows clients to sort of just engage with their relationship with food. So they may say, we may talk about like, well, what's your protagonist? What's the number one challenge that you have, right?
mhm.
So my protagonist is sugar. My protagonist is, fast food. My protagonist is I don't make time for myself. So they okay, well that do I where did that part of the story come from? Well, it came from watching my mom and it came from being busy and having 4 kids and I never paid attention and now I have to and oh, that's interesting. So like there's your backstory. Like, oh, okay. So where did the story come from? Like, oh yeah, my mom was into weight loss and oh, I remember, my dad saying, oh, you're so beautiful if you were just a little thinner and squished my cheeks and like people have some deep-seated intense stories behind why they don't like the way their bodies look, why they think they should eat a certain way. And so our job is to help them recognize that, oh yeah, that story is actually getting in the way. That's the story that's driving you. It's not willpower, it's not motivation, it's not intelligence, it's not wanting it enough or not wanting it enough, it's not self-sabotage. It's that these powerful stories are running in the background. And so our job is to unpack them, understand them, and rewrite them, edit them, write some new chapters, rewrite some old chapters. So, in a sense, reconstruct or construct a new story that actually serves their purposes, serves them better. Because most people's story right now is one that is leading them, down a bad road. It's shame, it's guilt, it's judgment, it's, beating themselves up, it's blaming themselves when they can't stick to a program. It's always their fault. They're not enough. But they don't think of it this way. Because what we've done in our industry, as you know, we've split it off into nutrition science and eating disorders and psychotherapy. Instead of recognizing that the average person doesn't have an eating disorder, but the average person isn't going to make change just because we teach them what to do. Like there's this big middle ground of people who are like, I'd like to make that change, but I need logistical and sort of psycho-emotional help to make it happen because it's actually a lot harder to implement it than you, the nutritionist, you, the naturopath, you, the doctor, realize it is to make the change.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like another element to this is that for some people, there's other issues around it, and that it looks like maybe their access to healthy foods, like from a financial or like a food desert aspect, and then there's also the element of like their physiology, um, because I subscribe to the idea that it's like okay, you're born into this world where the food environment is incorrect for your body, like
Mm-hmm.
out the gate. As soon as you have something that's not breast milk, it's probably, well, vegetable puree, fair enough. But within the first 6 months of your life, you're going to be starting to have foods that are not really the right thing for human physiology. And there's this dishealth that starts to unfold: insulin resistance, metabolic endotoxemia, gut health, like lack of fiber, dysbiosis of the microbiome, leptin and ghrelin, hunger hormones being dysregulated. And so it's tricky because they have like, I want to hear what you think about this, but it's like, other than this, like, let's say we like correct the story, we still have these challenges around like their physiology and their access. But what do you think?
Yeah, two separate issues. Access is a social cultural issue, which we can talk about and unpack, because I do a lot of cultural anthropology of food stuff as well. But to speak to your point about the physiology, what I've said to people, and I agree completely, is if you haven't identified your personal physiology, your personal sort of blueprint for nutrition, if you haven't addressed your underlying physiological challenges, no amount of attitude shift is going to get you there. I don't care how motivated you are. I don't care how dedicated you are, how committed you are. If you're eating the wrong foods, if you're putting the wrong things in your body and you're feeding your dysbiosis, if you are eating foods that you are already sensitized to, you're not helping yourself. And if you think that it's then your fault, here's where the story piece comes in. If you think it's your fault that you just don't have motivation to resist drinking dairy, or you just don't have the motivation to not snack at night, but you've never addressed the fact that you have a dairy intolerance and that you eat one meal a day and you're ravenous by 9 o'clock at night, and of course you overeat at night, like if you're not addressing the physiology, no amount of story work is ever going to get you there. But clients blame themselves and think that somehow they can just magically have control over these physiological issues, or they think that it shouldn't matter. And they don't do what they need to do, which is to come and see you and get a personalized blueprint, right, for their specific body, their specific needs. They go online and they check out an Instagram follower, or they read a book, or they hear an article, or they talk to a friend, and they just sort of try something. They're like, I'm just going to do keto. I'm just going to go gluten-free. I'm just going to fast 16 and 8. They just try stuff, and they're like, oh, it doesn't work. Oh, I suck. I got to try something different. And you're like, that's not even what you're supposed to be doing. Come talk to me so I can actually put you on the right path. And so the problem is we get into this culture of sort of self-diagnosis and self-medicating around nutrition, right? And there's so much shame and blame and judgment around food that people hesitate to see nutritionists, right? Because you've heard this. Because they're so afraid you're going to take away all their favorite foods, make them eat a bunch of foods that they've never heard of, that they don't understand, they don't recognize, that are expensive, hard to prepare, don't taste good, quote unquote, right? And upend their lives, make their lives miserable in terms of, not letting them eat what they like. The classic nutritionists have been, eat this, don't eat that. Eat less of this, eat less of that. And while a little bit of that goes a long way, like you said, you got to make sure the client understands the fundamentals. That's all they've had. The tradition of our industry is, once you've given people the data, once you've handed them this big thing, you're like, great, go do that. And then when they don't do that, you're like, why aren't you doing that? I'm not saying you, I'm saying our industry.
Yeah.
Right? And so then they feel bad and they're like, forget about it. I'm not going to come back to these people.
Yeah. And I find that the more things someone tries, the less likely it is that anything will work, because they just really start to lose, I think, like self-efficacy. Like they start to lose confidence that they can get anywhere. And then that becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, that it's like they're not then as motivated to even fully do it. And so they end up, like you said, just kind of jumping around, but then not fully doing anything. And just the fact that they're working with a nutritionist who gives them new food rules doesn't necessarily really change that underlying thing that I think you're talking about.
Two things. One is, I have a saying, which is that new information given to a client that they cannot use, or at least hold in reserve without judgment, is disempowering. It makes them feel worse about themselves, because it turns into a should. I should be doing this. I shouldn't be doing that. I know all the rules, but I can't do it. And what I also tell people is, if our clients could do 80% of what they already know is right for them, like they know a lot of what's right for them, if they just did 80% of it, 80% of the time, they'd get great results. So instead of trying to teach them new data and new information, why don't we focus on helping them be consistent with 80% of what they already know works 80% of the time? But the problem is, our industry, the nutrition industry, has focused so much on nutrition education as the one and only thing, or as the first and most important thing. and have forgotten that the behavior change management, psychology is equally, if not more important, because once someone knows what to do, helping them implement it is the most important thing, because a plan that's not implemented is no good to us. Doesn't matter how great the plan is. If they don't do it, it can't do its job. It can't help.
Yeah, exactly. What's something that you wish every, say, dietitian or case or professional nutritionist, like what do you wish they would say or talk about with every patient they work with?
How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Literally ask that question. How do you feel about that? Feel. How do you feel about that?
Scary feelings. No, I'm just kidding.
Scary feelings, exactly. And every nutritionist, every naturopath, everybody I've ever worked with in this industry, and I've worked with thousands at this point, they're like, oh, I'm not supposed to talk to people about emotions. That's therapy. I'm like, hold up, hold up. Just talking to people about feelings is called talking to a human.
Yeah.
Humans are emotional creatures. You can have a conversation about emotion with a normal everyday person and not be doing therapy. You're not trying to diagnose a mental health condition. You're not trying to treat a mental health condition. You're not stepping out of your ethical boundaries. But humans are sticky, emotional creatures.
Mhm.
And we've been trying to treat them as though they are logical, rational robots. Data in, action out. As if I just give you the right data, you will automatically do the right actions without actually recognizing that we're psychosocial emotional beings. And therefore, the data is going to get sifted through that part of our story. And we're going to have feelings about it that are going to override our rational front brain, executive function, however we want to think about it, part of ourselves. But when I ask a client, how do you feel about that? Like they come in and say, oh yeah, I've been diagnosed with diabetes. How do you feel about that? Oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed and I'm totally freaked out and I think my life is over. Oh, okay. Why is that? Well, because you're going to tell me I can't ever eat sugar again. How do you feel about that? I'm pissed. Why? Because I love a croissant in the morning, or I love ice cream, or I love this or that or the other thing. Okay. So you think I'm going to tell you you can't ever eat sugar again? Yes, and I'm freaked out about it. I don't even really want to be here because of that. Okay, that's a conversation that the average nutritionist, naturopath, personal trainer never has with their client, yet that's the undercurrent of what's happening. So when the practitioner says, well, here's the thing, your blood sugars are really high and you got an A1C of 11, so we're going to get on top of your blood sugar regulation. I think what we're going to really work on is we're going to work on cutting back on carbs and really get that blood sugar under control. How does that sound? Great.
Yeah.
Okay. While inside, they're like, ah, they're freaking out. And so then they give them a plan. They walk out the door going, okay, thanks. You just took away all my favorite foods. Didn't ask anything about how I feel about that. They don't even recognize that's what they want. Well, there's another person who's not giving me what I want, which is how can I get my blood sugar under control, but not be miserable and give up everything I love that's sweet for my entire life?
Yeah.
But they don't say that because the practitioner firebombs them with data and information about how we're going to help them be successful with all this great dietary and exercise approach, and never once considers, there might be some thoughts and feelings about what I've just given this person. And our industry is failing people because we don't teach enough psychology, coaching, and behavior change in most programs. Now, selfishly, our program, they get to see me, teach them that, but not all programs have a psych or health coaching component.
Right. Yeah, I think
I'll get off my soapbox.
that dietitians learn to this. It's called motivational interviewing, but it's like not even a whole course, I don't think. I think it's like a part of one course.
And the problem with motivational interviewing, while I love the theories and I do love some of the toolkits that motivational interviewing provides, food story coaching, food relationship coaching is so much more inclusive. It's a much bigger concept. What happens with motivational interviewing, in my experience, is that it's used as a blunt object. It's a very blunt tool. Why are you resistant? Why don't you want to do that? What are you going to do instead? How are we going to make that happen? Let's make a goal. How are we going to make that goal? Well, how many times a day are you going to do that? Bang, 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 bang. And they're like, okay.
Yeah,
Whoa.
you're not really asking about their feelings with
And
that.
they don't
You're just
ask
trying to
feelings.
coach them into coming up with their own ideas.
It's
Yeah.
pure logistics, and it's very confrontational. It's very interrogatory. It's like being interrogated. What am I going to do? When are you going to do it? How many times are you going to do it? So
Right.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like, okay.
Like I'm going to corner you into making a SMART goal.
Yeah, I'm going to make you make a SMART goal. I'm going to box you in and make you pick a SMART goal.
But you're going to pick it.
They can act like they're picking it, but they don't feel like they've actually picked it. They feel like they've been hemmed into a corner.
Sure.
One of the things that happens in our industry is we start from the baseline of being a practitioner, and we give information and we give data and we tell people what to do and we offer advice and suggestions and protocols. Then if we're lucky, there's that next section up the pyramid where maybe you have a little bit of MI, maybe you have a little behavior change management, maybe you know a little bit about something, and maybe you actually can communicate with your client. And then at the very tip of the pyramid, maybe we think about being a human, a compassionate, heart-centric, non-judgmental, radically accepting human. And that's why our industry doesn't work. We need to flip that on its head. And at the very base of the pyramid, we should be being a human, compassionate, heart-centric, understanding, non-judgmental, and meet clients truly where they're at. To be like, I hear you, I feel you, I see you, I get what you're going through. I don't have it myself, but I get it. I work with clients every day. I can tell this is hard. I see that you're upset about your diagnosis and the thought that this is going to transform your life. I'm with you. Then the next stage, we've got to concentrate more on coaching, psychology, and behavior change management, which is about communication. And then at the very, very top, once we've established that we've got a human connection and a good coaching connection, and we can communicate with the client, then fine, bring out our expertise. Because now the client might actually be ready, willing, and able to hear and implement what we have to offer them. And then we need to get into the practice of, offering more information, but giving it to them, titrated. We need to give it to them in smaller doses.
Yeah.
The problem is the average client walks out with something this thick and being told, great, go turn your life upside down and go do this. And they're like,
well, what do you say about this? I feel like there's almost, I think practitioners, a lot of them are scared to not do that because they know that because of the way the world is with diet and nutrition, that the patient is sort of primed to expect this sort of like all-in comprehensive approach, like a full framework of how to eat. And ideally it's going to be extreme and it's going to be something they've never heard of before. And it's going to be like, this whole new thing. And even though if they get it, they're not going to probably be able to do it. That's what the practitioner, I think, thinks that the patient is wanting. And sometimes the patient really says that's what they're wanting. And so I think it can be scary for a practitioner to step back and say, like, not only going to let the patient lead, because that's kind of the motivational interviewing piece, but I'm going to avoid giving them very much. And if they walk away with like one tiny goal, they're going to be like mad. You ever think about?
I totally get that. Yeah, feel that way. I totally get this. This is something I work with all the time with mentees. The reason why practitioners fail in that regard is because they don't have the coaching, the psychology, and the behavior change / communication skills.
Yeah.
So what happens is they're operating in two black boxes. They don't really know what the client is actually thinking and feeling, and they're not actually telling the client what they're actually thinking and feeling themselves as practitioners. They're not actually having an actual conversation with the client about what's really going on. So, Erin, tell me, what are you looking for today? Are you looking for a comprehensive plan, or are you looking for more help with being successful over time? Oh, no one's ever asked me that. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, most people come into my office and they think what they want is a big protocol that gives them all this information, but then what they realize is when they get home, they can't implement it. Does that sound familiar? Oh my God, that's what I've had every single time I've ever seen a practitioner. How's that work for you? It sucks. What happened? Oh, I can't ever use that program. Okay, so are you looking for something different? Because I don't offer that to most of my clients because I know it doesn't work. Oh, what do you offer? Well, I focus more on the coaching component, which is I'll slowly give you the program over time, focus more on implementing a small amount of it over time successfully, and we'll build on success and eventually get the whole program going. How does that sound? Oh, I didn't know we could do it that way. Yeah, that sounds a lot better. Okay, I just had a conversation in 3 minutes and I've totally changed the dynamics of the client-coach relationship.
Totally.
But that's not what's happening. Because unfortunately, too many people who came out of the RD system, the medical system, and even frankly, some naturopaths and some nutritionists, depending on where they went to school, if they were lucky, Erin, they got MI. But they don't have the communication skills and the confidence to do behavior change management. They don't understand the psychology. And so they can't have these conversations. And so then they're stuck with, well, I guess I better be preemptively proactive and just give the client everything I think they might want. That way I've earned my value, right? I've validated my existence and I've validated the client's quote unquote expectation that I'm going to like blow their brain away with all this amazing information, even though the reality is they're probably never going to use it and it's going to overload them and they're not going to be successful. But hey, at least they got what they thought they wanted. They didn't get what they needed, but at least they got what they thought they wanted. Now what I'm left with is I got to go get a new client because that client's not coming back because they got blown out of the water by
Yeah.
this 16-page protocol and no support to implement it. I never asked them how they felt about it. I never asked them their thoughts. I never collaborated with them. I just said, well, that's what they're asking for. Here you go. Here's a program. And wonder why they didn't ever come back to see me again.
Yeah.
And that's our industry.
I had one this morning. She said, I went and saw a women's health practitioner to get help. She diagnosed me with PCOS. She told me to eat a pescatarian Mediterranean diet. I don't know what that means. It sounds really restrictive. I'm totally confused by it, so I'm never going to go see her again. She literally said that.
If I had a nickel,
Right?
our industry wonders why we aren't having success in our businesses. And there's a lot of reasons. And one of them is we're not coaching, we're not supporting people, we're not actually helping them with behavior change. We're being data brokers.
Yeah.
So we end up with terrible retention. We're losing 60% out of the back door, which means we've got to kill ourselves to bring a new client in the front door. But then we lose 60% of them. We have a crap reputation as an industry. Nobody wants to go see a nutritionist because they know they're going to be told, don't eat this food that you love. Go eat this food that you don't recognize and don't like. I'm going to make your life miserable by taking you all the pleasurable foods away from you. So nobody wants to go see a nutritionist or a naturopath unless they have to. Right. So yeah, why? So we can't help people because we're doing it wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have now 7 dietitians on our team, and it's funny. We're now doing this for several years. What I've noticed is that the ones who just naturally do some of, not that they're like on the level of someone that you coach, but like the people who just naturally gravitate towards conversations about feelings and about what's going on in that person's life tend to do less of the sort of like, here's your supplement protocol, here's your diet protocol. And then we have practitioners that tend to be more on that spectrum where it's like more formulaic, more data driven. And I've noticed that it's very like almost a perfect correlation. Like the more that they, in the minds of traditional sort of care, like seem to do less, they have the best retention.
And the best results.
And the best results. Yeah.
It's actually the better business model for practitioners and for patients. Everybody wins.
I guess you could make an argument that they have good retention. That might be bad, as in like the person, if they got fully well, they would like leave. But I find that people, when they're gaining progress and want to sustain that progress, they tend to stay. But when they feel frustrated and like they're not getting anywhere, they'll tend to leave. So I do see like retention is tied to like getting benefit for someone.
There's the difference between retention forever for the rest of my life and retention for the 18 months that it takes for me to actually convert from a SAD diet to an ovo-lacto, pescatarian diet and all the challenges that entails. And the client who comes back every week or 2 weeks for 18 months, you think, good gosh, this person's just addicted to talking. They just want a best friend. No. They need a good coach who can help them make the hard lifestyle change over time that it takes and deal with all of the complexities of making those changes over time. So that in 18 months or 2 years, they don't need anything more than maybe a pep talk once in a while or a check-in every 3 to 6 months or blood work done every year or something like that. But if you're trying, like most doctors and most naturopaths, they'll send someone to a nutritionist and say, I need you to get this person's A1C under control, get them off of sugar. And the person's 11 on their A1C. And we start talking to the client, and the client is freaked out by their diagnosis, overwhelmed. And the reason they're using sugar is because it's the only comfort they have in their stressful, empty lives. And we're telling them, okay, the naturopath wants you off of sugar. And the naturopath's like, why aren't you getting them off of sugar? Why aren't you getting them off of sugar? Just tell them to stop eating sugar. And we have to say, do you understand how important sugar is to this person? Was it more important than their diabetes? Actually, yes, it is right now. Well, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. Do you not understand the power of addiction, or at least comfort eating and the psychology behind comfort eating? Like, well, whatever, I don't care about that. Just get them off of sugar if they want to get their A1C under control. They just can't conceptualize why just telling the client your diabetes will get better if you just drop sugar out of your life entirely, and why they won't do that. It's like, because it's psycho, spiritual, and emotional. Food is the most connected, energetic, meaningful part of our entire lives. Like, yeah, okay, you can change the way you dress, you change your hairstyle, yeah, some people like to exercise more or less, but like you literally, food is everything, right? Food is the deepest, most intrinsic part of the human experience next to breath. You
Yeah.
breathe, you live, you eat, you live, or you die. And so you can go and look at psychology, you can look at anthropology, you can look at history, you can look at literature, and you can see the power of food is massive. And we have totally just sort of disassociated ourselves. It's all nutrients or it's all guilt and shame eating. And there's nothing in between to help people understand that, no, you just have a complex, normal human, emotional, psychological relationship with food. It has meaning and it's important to you, and you eat for every reason under the sun other than just nutrients.
Yeah. So how would that typically play out in your world? So you have this person with an A1C of 11, but their sugar habit is actually more important to them than their diabetes right now. And you discuss that and learn that. And then where do you go from there?
So I work with people differently because I only do food story coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my mentees, they're almost all nutritionists and naturopaths, nutritionists. So they're doing both.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that one of them was working with a client who had A1C of 11. I've trained them to do a few things. One is to have a frank conversation with them about their diagnosis of diabetes, about what they understand about their A1C, how do they feel about the diagnosis, how do they feel about the treatment plan from the doctor, first and foremost. And then to discuss with them where they are in terms of what's the most important thing for them. How do they want to balance things out? What do they want to try to do? And if they say, well, if the doctor says I need to get off of sugar, then I'm going to work on getting off of sugar. And then my mentee would say, okay, how hard do you think that's going to be? How many times in the past have you tried to get off of sugar? And talk to them about their story, their relationship with sugar, so that they can have a conversation about, well, under ideal circumstances and given, in a magical world of fairy dust and unicorns, if get you to drop sugar tomorrow, yes, that would have the greatest impact on your A1C. But let's talk about what's realistic. How much sugar in your life is realistic that you're going to want to keep or need to keep yourself emotionally, energetically, whatever? Like, you're not going to give it all up, are you? Well, I have to give it all up. Do you want to give it all up? Well, no, I don't want to give any of it up. Aha. So here's the tug. You don't really want to give up sugar, but you want to get better with your A1C. We've got to find some sort of middle ground here to work from.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not ready to give up sugar. Okay, well, if you're not willing to give up sugar, I've got other ideas, but they're going to be harder and take more time because it's an indirect way to get your blood sugar under control. What does that mean? Well, I'm talking about fasting. I'm talking about, super high fiber foods. I'm talking about tons of water. I'm talking about cardio and strength training. I'm talking about a lot of changes to downregulate your blood sugar if you're not going to downregulate your consumption of sugar. I'm willing to negotiate this with you, and I'll work with you to find the plan that works best for you. But I have to be honest with you and give you the sciencey stuff. Like, I got to give you the sort of ethical responsibility of being a good nutritionist, which is, this is how it works. This is the science.
Yeah.
But I'm here to help you with the sort of rest of it, which is the coaching and the psychology and the emotions that come along with what I'm asking you to do. So let's work as a team and figure out our best plan forward.
Yeah.
Can I have more than 6 months? Can I take 6 months to get off of sugar? I'll let the doctor know that we're just not going to try to get your sugar consumption, done in 3 months. We're going to work on it for 6 months. Okay,
Yeah.
but then what are you ready, willing, and able to do right here, right now to get your sugar consumption reduced? Well, I'll stop using X in the morning. You're comfortable with that? Yes. You're committed to that? Yes. You feel like you can actually do that? Yes, I can actually do that. But please do not take away my this other thing at night. Fine, we'll leave that thing at night, but we're going to really go after this thing in the morning. And it's a negotiation. It's still scientifically found. It's still based on MNT, medical nutrition therapy. It's definitely designed for them specifically.
This might make you mad, but it sounds a little bit like MI too. Of like, you let them decide what they're gonna do.
Of course, it's still their story to live. It's their life to live.
Yeah.
But I'm being a little bit more intense. I'm being a little bit more like,
sure.
straightforward.
You'd normally have more time, of course.
This would take time and compassion and it's like very compassionate and very gentle and very heart-centric. It's very much like, how do you feel about that? Like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. It's like, completely overwhelmed. It's like, we'll work on it together. And like, okay. They know that they can actually have success when given the support and not asked to, leap, a tall building in one fell swoop.
Yeah. It's not as simple as saying, how do you really want this to look? Because they come in not via any of their fault or your fault, with I would almost say like a lack of trust. It's okay to be like socially inappropriate with what they say. It's like they feel like there's this like socially appropriate thing that they should say, and it's that they're going to be perfect or they're going to go big or they're going to make huge changes overnight. And
Yep.
so like
Yep.
that's an important thing to establish, is that you have no expectations. And in fact, I mean, I'm curious what you would say in that scenario. If you said, okay, well, what are you willing to do? And they said, you know what, even though I care about sugar more than I care about anything else, I'm going to absolutely quit sugar this month. I'm not going to have any sugar. I'm curious what you would say to that.
I'd say I would be supportive of that goal if we have a realistic chance of you being successful. What's going to happen if you try that and you fail? And the client says, "Oh, I feel crappy about myself." I'm like, "Okay, would it be better to shoot really high and miss?" There's two ways of looking at goal setting. One is shoot for the moon, and then you reach the stars. If you don't hit your goal but you get close, how are you going to feel? Okay, so you're a I got to hit my goal kind of person, not a shoot for the stars or shoot for the moon and hit the stars.
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh, that's interesting. I believe in goals that are small enough to achieve, but large enough to matter." And they're like, "Ooh, what do you mean by that?" I'm like, I want you to succeed, because success breeds success. So I'd rather have you be successful on a small goal, which builds up to another small goal, which builds to a medium goal, and those stack up to a large goal. How does that sound versus shoot for the moon, but maybe miss? They're like, And if they say, I want to shoot for the moon, but I might miss, I say, well, let's talk about what that looks like. Let's talk about expectation management. Let's talk about what it means to fail. Let's talk about what it means to shoot for a goal, but miss it and come back down, 2 steps lower. No one talks to them about that. No one has the meta conversation. No one has the conversation about the conversation. I lay out parameters and we talk about expectation management. So the client's like, oh, I see. Yeah, you're right. I think about it. If I miss the mark, I think that's all or nothing. I'm like, well, we can't go for all or nothing if we're going to be successful. If you want to shoot for the moon, but you miss and hit the stars, how are you going to kind of modulate your sense of quote unquote failure if you just missed the mark by 20%? They're like, oh, I never think about it that way. It's either I hit the goal or I don't hit the goal. I'm like, okay, that's all or nothing thinking. How has that worked for you in the past? They're like, it works for a while, but it never sustains it. Exactly. Very few people can sustain all or nothing thinking long term. So do you want to do that, or do you want to achieve a goal that's maybe smaller, but you can build off of the success of that goal and you can get all of the success? And they're like, I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. Everyone always just says, here's your goal, go do that. Or I just pick a goal and they say, sure, go do that goal. No one's ever questioned me about my goals before. But I like this. This is nuance. This is making me think again about like, how do I really want to achieve my goals? Nobody has these conversations in our industry. Not nobody, it's not a common conversation.
It's so good because one of the important things you're alluding to is that they come in often with broken confidence.
Exactly.
But despite that, they'll often go for a plan or even request a plan that will further break their confidence. And so it's really important to understand that and maybe even openly discuss with them of like, I like how you kind of laid out, like, look, it's not, if we agree on like a small realistic goal, that's not the end of it. What we're trying to do is build momentum and build up success over time, kind of like we're layering in your plan over time. And I think that is a really important thing to understand, that what that does is it does help to rebuild their confidence, because of what we talked about of like when they're not confident, it makes it even harder to do something that they could have done when they were confident, because they're almost like sometimes like, oh, if I fully do this, if I give it 100% and then I fail, that'll be crushing to me and I'm already kind of crushed.
Yep.
Versus if I kind of go half in and I don't succeed, then I won't have another crushing failure. I can just kind of chalk it up to like, well, I didn't fully do it. So it's kind of I'm kind of disappointed in myself, but it's not like as bad as if I had fully done it. So I think we don't talk, again, it's the quiet thing. It's so unspoken. Very few practitioners actually talk openly about it, but I think they are right on point. That is like one of the most important things going on in this type of work.
Yeah. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'll wrap us up towards the end with this.
Yeah.
My model is what I call an empowerment first model, which is the opposite of our standard industry. Our industry standard is education first.
Yeah.
Let me teach you more and explain to you more.
Disempowering. Yeah.
And it completely disempowers people. So what I say is, let's focus on empowerment first. What do you know you should be doing? What do you know is already getting in your way? What do you know you need to be successful? How can I help you and help support you being successful in what you already know? Okay, let's try that. Let's get those hurdles out of the way. Let's address those concerns and issues. And then we'll start to sprinkle in and pepper in new data as you're ready, willing and able to take that new data and apply it and use it successfully. Now, if it's a brand new client, fine, then you build the plan and you say, okay, out of this plan, let's negotiate what we're going to first work on. Because I'm not asking you to do this whole plan. I want you to feel empowered and powerful and capable. I want you to have self-efficacy. I want you to have agency. I want you to feel like I'm really kicking butt and taking names. Like I can do this. Why? Because you've given me small, realistic goals that I can chew on and work on, and I can negotiate my life around. And you don't beat me up when I come in and I didn't have success.
Yeah,
you just help me figure out like what's next. And like, I can do this, but I need the support long-term to do this. Like, okay, great. We'll build the plan and we'll start from there. What I tell practitioners is hold the plan in back from the patient. Don't give it to them. Don't just hand it to them. The worst thing we do right now is we say, here's your plan, take a look. And they go.
Yeah. I feel like functional medicine clinics are like the worst.
Right. Every page they turn over, their mouth drops
crazy.
more, right? Their jaw drops more. No, what I say is, look, I have your plan, but I don't want to overwhelm you with this plan. It's a big plan, but I put the whole thing together for you because we'll need this plan. This is our guide. This is our map book, right? This is our Google Maps. This is our MapQuest, to age myself, right? This is our plan. This is how we're going to get you there. But I have to ask you, what are you ready, willing, and able to do on this plan? I have what I think would be ideal. Obviously, that's my expertise. But whether I think it's the right thing for you or not is different, right? Or whether you think it's the right thing for you or not is different. I might say, yeah, get off of sugar is the absolute best thing you could do for your PCOS. But you've got to decide how ready, willing, and able are you to go after sugar. If you say, I just can't right now, and you say, okay, but can you change your protein consumption? Can you sleep more? Can you drink more water? Like, what of these can you do? And the client says, I'll totally drink more water. I will absolutely up my protein, and I will recommit to seeing my personal trainer 3 times a week. You're like, hails bells, do that. And we'll get to the sugar. And they're like, really? Like, that's okay? You're like, look, I could hand you this and say, get off of sugar, but are you going to do it? They're like, no, not realistically. I'm like, well, then why am I even asking? Let's build on what we know you can do.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, that's really collaborative. Thank you for being so supportive. And I'm like, well, why would we do it any other way?
Win-win. It's fair for them. It's easier for you.
My practitioners who've done my training, they're so funny. They come back and they go, I don't feel like I'm doing as much work anymore, and I'm charging more, and my clients seem happier. What's up with that? I'm like, yeah, that's how that works. When you're coaching and clients feel supported and they're actually making change, they'll gladly keep coming back and pay you more. The reason they don't want to go back and see traditional practitioners is because they're not getting anything out of it. I had a client say, I don't know if this client's getting much out of seeing me. I said, why? She said, well, she's still struggling with making changes. I'm like, how long has she been coming to see you? 6 months. I said, she's doing fine. Why? How do you know that? I'm like, because nobody comes back for 6 months and pays you if they're not getting something out of their time.
Even if with insurance, they don't come because their time is valuable.
That's right.
Yeah.
The time is valuable. The copay, the time and energy that it takes to get there. If they're not getting something out of it, they won't come.
Absolutely.
And our industry knows it because we see our role. Most people in our industry are just like, desperately trying to get new clients because they keep losing clients off the back. And they're like, I don't understand why we can't keep clients on our books. Because your model's upside down. Your model is a assessment, delivery, check-in, and let people roll for 6 weeks. No wonder they're not succeeding.
Yeah.
Keep coaching people, but we don't teach that in our industry as a standard.
It's all about the empowerment. I think that's so good.
Yeah. So that's my model. Empowerment first, education second. I mean, certainly education is important, but if we're not empowering people, all the education just sort of sits on a shelf, literally just sits there like, yeah, I have a plan, but I don't really do it. It's too much. I don't like it, or whatever.
This has been so inspiring, Ian. And we have tons of practitioners that listen to the podcast. So maybe you can tell people a little bit about your training and how it works and where they can find more about you.
Yeah, so I have an online training like a lot of practitioners, who've been doing it a long time. It's a self-directed plan. It's so 7 modules teaching all about the philosophy and the skills and the common topics and how to work and talk to people about difficult emotions and how to understand what it means to do work as a food relationship coach, not just as a other type of practitioner, how to weave it into your practice, how to work as a collaborator with your patients and not just a hierarchical top-down practitioner. It's a whole step-by-step 7, like I said, I think it's 7 modules, 8 modules. So it's at my website, foodstorycoaching.com. foodstorycoaching.com.
Yeah.
And I think it's /professionals or something like that. But you can
Yes.
find it at Food
Yeah.
Story.
We'll put it in the show notes.
We'll get it in the notes.
Yeah.
And then that's self-directed. So people can take it and get it done as fast as they want or as quickly as they need to. And then it includes a live mentorship call with me, and then also some peer mentorship with one of my master coaches.
Amazing. Okay, well, we'll link that in the show notes, and yeah, definitely, I want my whole team to take it. So,
Oh, that's sweet.
I'm gonna work that.
Yeah.
Thank
Cool.
you.
All right. Well, we'll talk offline and we'll get that figured out.
Sounds good, Ian. Thanks again for being on the show, and
Thank you.
we'll talk with you soon. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.